Thanks for joining today on this Safety Roundtable, and we're going to be talking today about the 4 Ps of good safety and risk management, the 4 outcomes that you can achieve, which are aligned to business or organizational outcomes. So thinking about what we're doing in safety and how that's beneficial to our organization, and how we consider that, how we talk about that, how we influence people to take action, to be more proactive when it comes to safety and risk, and all that good stuff. So everything's set up. The tech is all working. Seem to have got the hang of it now after a few mishaps with some of the tech and the streaming to start with. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining today. So this is what we're going to be talking about, the 4 Ps. So this is something that I've kind of coined, and if you've joined me on any of these roundtables before, you know I love a good bit of alliteration or an acronym. And so the 4 Ps are basically the outcomes you get if you put in place a good, solid, proactive safety and risk management regime. I'm just letting more people in as we go. And in order, they are protection. So that's the feeling of safety and the feeling that you are being looked after and in a safe and supportive environment, whether that be as a member of staff or as a customer. Performance. So if you feel protected, if you feel safe, that drives higher performance in the business in all sorts of ways. We'll talk about that. If you've got a high-performing team, a high-performing organization, what are you going to get? You're going to get profit from those operations. And if you've got profit, you get the 4th P, which is power. And that means the power to do something meaningful, something good in the world. So that could be something altruistic like charitable work or social impact. It could mean the power to help the world in other ways by growing your business and expanding. It could be adding new product lines. There's all sorts of things you can do. If you have protection, performance, and profit, you've got the power to do lots of cool things in the world. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Quickly, if you're not familiar with me, I do 3 bits of content involved in safety and risk each week. I do this roundtable on a Wednesday. I have a podcast which comes out on a Saturday, Safety and Risk Success Podcast. And I do a newsletter on LinkedIn as well called This Week in Safety and Risk. My day job is involved in slips and falls. So that's the area of safety that I specialize in. And in that realm, I've worked on some high profile cases and support quite a number of blue chip sort of clients and partners like AXA Insurance. We've won some awards in the business as well. So hopefully we know what we're doing. And what really gets us ticking, what really gets us excited is helping our clients. We've helped several thousand clients across the country and even some internationally now. And at last count, we reckoned that we're saving about £10 million of slip and fall claims each year. So having a decent impact in that world. So that's just a bit about me. In terms of today, we're going to cover this concept of the 4 Ps, give you some examples and some data around this, and then kind of some thoughts from me on the benefits and how this all works. And then, as always, open it up to discussion. So love to get your feedback. Are there any extra Ps we can add? How have you seen this in your businesses? How do you think you can take these concepts and run with them to everybody's benefit? So let's start then with thinking about why do we, in commas, do safety versus why do we, in commas, do business. And this is a bit of a recap of some of the themes we talked about last week. But if you think about safety, very narrowly, what are we thinking about? Well, most people would be thinking about stopping people getting hurt, health, safety, environment, zero harm. Quite simple. That's what we're doing. Why we're doing safety. Why are we doing business? Well, we're doing business. If you're like I am, a shareholder and a director of a company, you've got an obligation to act in the best interests of your shareholders and to try to generate a profit for the business and to add value to all key stakeholders. So we're trying to have a good business outcome. And the challenge, as always, is how do we weigh these two up? And does safety help or does safety hinder the desire to perform well in the business? So you may have seen this on an email I sent this morning or on LinkedIn. Safety as a burden versus safety as an enabler. So if we think about safety, many people would look at it like this. So if the piggy bank is representing, perhaps this is the wrong diagram to use, but if the piggy bank is representing success for the organization, as in profitability and growth, is safety a weight dragging it down to the floor? So lots of people would think about safety being a drain on the bottom line, as in a cost, not a profit center, a pain in the backside, perhaps. Some people might say that. And I suppose thinking about it as something that we have to do, so a requirement to do it. What about if we think about this another way? So let's think about safety as a rather than a big heavy red box, let's think of it as a green rocket ship, and it's dragging us upwards and it's enabling us to produce that profit. What would the perception of safety be then? Well, I think we'd be thinking of it as a driver of profit and as a driver of growth. We'd see it as a cornerstone of the business, not a pain in the backside. And we'd look at it as something that we want to do, not something we have to do, but something we want to do because we can see all the benefits of it. And my strong experience is that argument, can certainly be made. And this is the framework, these 4 Ps that I would and have used to try to explain that to people. I think the big challenge here is as often is the case, it's about communications. How do we communicate the value? How do we engage with people? How do we get them on board with what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve? And so thinking about it in their terms, what are they trying to get to? They're trying to get to that power piece, right? Through profit and through performance. How do we help them to see that we're playing a key role in that through achieving that protection? So a few examples here, because one question that you're always going to get when you try to push safety as an enabler is, yeah, that all sounds good in theory, but where's the proof? There's been a number of scientific papers looking at this, lots of research looking at it. Google have done some research about this, for example. There's a few examples here. On the left here, look, employees' safety and health are of primary importance as both are key elements in achieving an organization's desired productivity and efficiency. So you can see that step between protection and performance. And I don't think that we as safety professionals need to draw the line between performance, profit, and power. We need to draw this line here at that starting point between safety, achieving protection, and that driving performance. On the right-hand side, physical and psychosocial conditions at work directly impact worker safety, health, and well-being, and influence enterprise outcomes such as turnover, absence, productivity, and healthcare costs. And in the middle, something from the construction industry, implementing proactive safety and safety training systems, it resulted in a 17% increase of productivity. Now, if you could, in your organizations, figure out a way of proving to the powers that be that doing something in safety and risk better, more proactively, would achieve a 17% increase in productivity, I promise you they would be all over it. So this is that line we've got to draw. We don't need to worry about the last few things, but we've got to be making this central point here, the 17%. That's kind of what we need to figure out in our own organizations. How can we prove that safety and risk proactively is improving performance? I've got an example here for you, and then we'll open it up to some discussion. So this is some work that I have done a few years ago now with a leisure company that operated at that time over 100 sort of health clubs in the UK. I've got overseas as well, but we were just looking at the UK. So what did we do around the 4 Ps, and what were some of the outcomes? So protection. So they had, as you'd expect, because they operated swimming pools, a problem with slips and falls insurance claims. They were getting roughly 1 claim a week across their estate. We did lots of work with them. We helped them with all manner of things around chimes, which I've explained to you on the roundtable before. But if you've never come across chimes, have a look on my LinkedIn profile or have a look on YouTube at some of the recordings of the roundtable, and you'll see chimes explained. And in fact, I think in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to do another deep dive on slips on the roundtable anyway. But we did a lot of stuff, and what we managed to do was empower their sites, empower their safety team, facilities team, etc., to drive up standards and outcomes, and they reduced the number of claims they were getting for slips from 1 a week, roughly, to 1 a month, roughly. So quite a dramatic reduction in claims, and obviously that was driven by a reduction in accidents. What does that mean in terms of performance? Well, if you start to log just in the health and safety team and the site operations teams, because any incidents are being dealt with by those 2 functions, they were saving time, they had a reduction of admin, but also in terms of the performance, let's think about customer-facing performance. The work that we did to reduce the risk of slips also drove up the standards of cleanliness of the facilities, for example. So they were achieving higher standards, getting better customer feedback. So all in all, the business was ticking along much better, much more nicely, having done this proactive work. Profit. So there were clearly direct savings, because if you've gone from 1 claim a week to 1 claim a month, you're definitely going to be saving some money, right? So they have the lower claims costs, those lower kind of hidden uninsurable costs as well. But actually, looking at it from the flip side, because of the stuff that they did around standards and customer experience, they ended up with higher retention and higher revenue. So actually, we were impacting both sides of the ledger here. We were impacting revenue positively, and we were reducing on costs. So the profitability of the business increased. And power, what did that mean? You know, what more meaningful things were they able to do as a result of taking these steps? Well, from a sort of a micro level, the safety team were freed up. So rather than rushing around dealing with claims all the time, they were able to work on the business, so a bit more strategic work around safety, rather than in the business, you know, in the weeds, filling in forms, doing investigations and all that good stuff. And then thinking about it from a bigger picture, this company has a charity partner that they work with, and they were able to donate some time and some money that they saved through reduction of these costs, to put towards that charity. So the safety team themselves spent more time working on that, so they had more extra time, so they were able to invest some time into the charitable stuff, and there was some cash. Additional cash that was able to be donated as well. So there's an example where we're able to put together a case study, drawing together the 4 Ps and showing how that kind of linear relationship between getting good, proactive, positive, effective safety and risk management on the left-hand side achieves that protection, driving performance, profit, and power. What does that mean then for us, safety and risk professionals? I think 2 things. I think we need to start measuring what we're doing and the impacts that it's having on performance, so we can start to draw that link. And then the second thing we need to do is we need to start shouting about it. We need to start communicating it. We need to start talking about safety as being the enabler. Safety and risk management as being the enabler, not being just focused on the negative side of stuff, but actually the positives and the business organizational benefits that it brings. So that's it from me in terms of slides. As always, trying to do 10 to 15 minutes of my thoughts and then open it up for a chat. So I can see there's a few things in the chat. We'll pick those off in a second. But in the meantime, head down if you want to come and speak. Head down to reactions, raise your hand, and I'll call you up. And the sorts of things I'd love to talk about. I mean, look, it's your platform. Talk about what you like. But what did you think of this? What did you learn? Does this resonate to you? Do you think this would resonate for your within your business? Any other P's we're missing? I'm always open to suggestions. And what can we do as a profession to get the word out about this kind of stuff? So let me stop sharing. I'm going to dive into the chat, but if you want to, I'll see what's in the chat, but if you want to say hello, open your reactions and stick your hand up. Right, so Andy said here, if you've got safety culture bills for duty of care, we've got no legislation. Yes, that's true. Vince, question, who gets to keep the rewards from the 17% production increase? Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? And that's, I think, where if you can start to measure this, let's take a step back. I always find it flabbergasting that health and safety often doesn't have a budget in a business. I think health and safety should have a budget, and I think they should be responsible for that budget. And I think if they can prove, like here, that what they're doing is driving an improvement, that should be reflected in their budget, and they should be able to invest more, and so on and so forth. I think the reality is, in that case, construction, I can't remember who it was now, Construction Magazine or something, showed that 17% increase. I suspect that the benefit of that went to operations or finance or something like that. But again, that's where we need to start measuring what we're doing better, drawing those lines, achieving those conclusions. And I would say that we should be trying to safeguard that budget to do even more good stuff around safety. Realistically, if we've got a 17% productivity increase and that drives 100 grand of profit to the bottom line, we're not going to get all 100 grand back, are we? But we might be able to get 50 grand or 35 grand or 25 grand or whatever, but a proportion of that would probably come back to us. Keith has said, this isn't just safety, it's proactive safety. Yes, I mean, sorry, that's a given, I think, for what we're talking about here. It's all about being proactive. That's the mission that we're on. David, how many slips happen that don't lead to a claim? Oh, great question. I mean, look, we don't want to get into the accident triangle because nobody's going to agree on that, but there'll be a huge number of slips that would have been happening in that business that wouldn't have led to a claim. So yeah, there'll be a lot of negative impacts happening that don't necessarily have that direct financial impact of a claim. Okay. Oh, let's see. You've got your hand up. Let's see. Will it work this week? Last week your internet crashed. Unmute yourself and say hello.
Okay. Sorry about last week. I really enjoyed today's class and today's discussion, the roundtable. But I want to get clarification. You said the problem is this challenge is communicating the four P's, but you didn't really tell us how we can handle that. I don't know if you can discuss as safety professionals, how do we handle that? Because actually, that's the problem. Trying to communicate that, okay, safety is not just a burden, but an enabler. That's the problem we have with most of our clients, most of our contractors, trying to communicate this fact that these forces are interwoven, they're all mixed together. So how do we communicate these to them? That power, performance, efficiency are all together. How do we do that to our clients? Because I don't know about you, but reality work is a big problem, it's a big challenge. So I'm showing it to everybody. Okay, let's talk about it as professionals.
Thanks. I think the audio was a bit difficult there, but I think let me recap what I think you said, and then hopefully everybody, if they couldn't hear you very well, let me know if I'm wrong. But I think your question really was, you get it, but how can we convince your clients or your contractors to get on board with this concept as well. Is that right? Is that a nod of the head? Is that that was the crux of the question?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, perfect. So exactly, yeah. How do we communicate it? So, well, I think. So I actually did I've talked about this a little bit on LinkedIn before, but I did a sort of a entrepreneur accelerator for a year from 2020 to 2021, and one of the key things that they talked about was, if you're an entrepreneur, and I'm using this as an analogy. If you're an entrepreneur leading a business and you're trying to launch a product or launch a service or something, you've got to be able to pitch. You've got to be able to explain what the concept is, because if you can't explain the concept to somebody in a clear and a concise way, then nobody's ever going to get it, and they're never going to buy something, or they're never going to change their way of thinking or whatever it is. And a lot of what I got from that was some of the stuff that you've seen on the roundtable before around the acronyms, the alliteration, making stuff as simple to understand as possible. So thinking about, what safety has often done in the past about communicating, it's been very academic, very heavy going, very hard to engage with. Actually, if we can make something short, snappy, to the point, easy to remember. So, a 4 Ps, a 5 Cs, a 3 Ds, or whatever. That's the sort of thing that will start to get into people's heads. So, I think the first thing is to make it clear and easily understood. The second thing I would say about how to get across this kind of point, and this is both to third parties but internally. Think of it from their perspective. So what do they really care about? And again, we talked a little bit about this last week. Everybody will say safety is important, but in reality, what's in it for them? What are their KPIs? What are they really trying to achieve? And try to figure out, like we've done here with these 4 Ps, how can we map out what our role is as a foundation to achieving the outcomes that they want to achieve. So I'd say getting it clear, engaging with them on a sort of personal level, so an emotional level. And then I think the third thing would be to try to get some logical arguments involved in this as well. So that would be where we need to get some of the data and start measuring stuff to prove the point. So I think people would, if you show this 4 Ps model to somebody, a lot of people will say, yeah, I get that, but can you prove it, for example? So I think trying to measure some of the work we're doing, the outcomes that has on performance of the business, and other safety KPIs as well, of course. But I think that's where, tying those 3 things together, we can influence and shape those kinds of relationships. Hopefully that helps. There's a few points. Kevin, why don't you? You've put a few things in the chat. Why don't you unmute yourself and give me a summary?
Yeah. Well, morning, Christian. Sorry, all the internet's down in our village, so I'm really struggling for connection this morning. Yeah. So they just put a comment in there about the about safety having a budget, and I mean, should safety have a budget? Or if you actually allocated elements of the operations and maintenance departments or the other departments, if they had to allocate a portion of their budget to be used with the safety team, would that not drive more ownership, over safety within those areas? Because is safety really the job of safety? And, if we're going down the road of the safety officer being in charge of, or being responsible for the safety of the organization, is that really where the ownership needs to be? Or, if we had the budgets allocated within the different departments to support the safety department and work with the safety department, then would that engage those teams more within the safety process? I'm just thinking of it differently.
Yeah, that's a good point. My instinctive response to that, and I'd be really interested to hear other people's thoughts if you want to put your hand up, is that what I've seen around budgets and P&Ls is operations and construction and so on and so forth really care about that bottom number, and their instinct is to try and save money on their P&L to pad out the bottom number as much as possible. So I worry if I think ideally you're right, but I think that probably the worry is that if there isn't that good engagement and there isn't the incentive, just based on my experience, and I'm interested to hear others, often what happens is that money is scrimped and saved, and so things aren't done perhaps as well as they could be. But I think probably you're in an idealistic world, you're right.
Just thinking, I completely agree with you, but I'm thinking maybe it's maybe it's a measure that we haven't looked at yet about safety, the safety culture of the organization. We all look at engagement within safety culture surveys. We look at people's perceptions of safety, how their supervisors respond to them. But do we actually really look at the engagement when it comes to a cost sharing point of view? Would that be, maybe that's a topic for another session for you, Christian, but would that actually be, would the amount of money that a company spends on safety be directly correlated to the safety performance improvements? I don't know.
I mean, you'd hope it would be, wouldn't you? Because otherwise, what are we doing? but no, it's good. And again, I think that's where we need to be measuring. We've spoken about measuring a lot on the roundtable, but measuring what we're doing and then what the impacts of that are, but positioning it in the way that it is very directly related to a key business objective. And then I think that's when we can, if you think about the Maslow, triangle, and safety is right a foundational key at the bottom, and you can't achieve anything else without getting that right. I think we need to reinforce that message again and again and again, and link what we're doing to some of the sort of higher priority stuff up the triangle. Nikki, you've got your hand up. Welcome to the roundtable. I'm not sure if you've been on one before, but I don't think so. So thank you for joining. Hopefully it won't be your only visit.
No, absolutely no, first time. Thank you very much. Interesting point actually that Kevin's just been making. I suppose from my own experience, which is all I can share by, is I've held 3 group positions, of which I never had any budget for, overseeing 12 sites, which everything then is down to influence. You have to actually end up working much more insularly, because you have to prove your point on one site in order then to get the buy-in to roll out on others. It can be a lot more difficult because you're up against one individual, director or team then. So you tend to try and pick and choose the teams that you're working with and get very mixed results. And really ironically, I work part-time at the moment with a very small site and have a healthy budget here, and have found that has that's got me much more buy-in. It's been a lot easier, and I'm achieving a lot more on this site with this team. And I think Kevin's points of, you really need to understand the maturity of the business, absolutely, and where the accountability and ownership are, because they are intrinsically linked. But it is about finding what that team can relate to, what we believe as safety professionals our priorities are going to be. What's dependent on the maturity level of the team. What are their KPIs? Have they got any safety accountability at all? People are only going to do what they believe they're there to do the best job they can. And if safety isn't part and parcel of what they're KPI'd on, then it's going to be very difficult to get that level of buy-in. So what can they relate to? What do they need to focus on, in relation to safety, and trying to get the buy-in that way, and starting off working with the team. But if you try and do it insularly, just by bringing in what we believe and probably is the right thing for safety, in that particular area, it might not be, you might not get that buy-in that you need.
I think you've got to meet people where they are. So yes. I think we everyone on this call, I think, probably buys into all the stuff that I've been talking about. but the question is not how do we convince ourselves, it's how do we convince other people. And it's kind of it's a challenge that I have in my business all the time, again, to use an analogy, because everybody is aware of the risk of slips and falls, but a lot of people feel as if it's not that big a problem for them, or it's not relevant to them. And so it's kind of like you've got to try and meet them where they are, and understand where they are, and then sort of work with them to get to influence them. And I think, and I think one of the things you really hit on is that I think that's so much easier to do. And look, I'm not a health and safety professional by trade, I suppose. I've not been a health and safety manager for a site or a group, but my just using the experience I've had in my life, it's much easier to do that in a more of a one-to-one or a smaller group setting like you're experiencing here than it is to try and implement that in a Tesco or a Walmart or something like that. So, so I think it's thinking about, how do we take these learnings and how do we, sort of influence people on a sort of ground up basis, but meet them where they are.
I think just to close on that point, from my own point of view, was you've hit on that, Christine, where what I've found is that when you are planning improvements or you want to try to get the point across, it is about applying that professionally in the same way structurally. So what is the outcome that you're expecting, at the start, before you even start this project? How are you going to achieve that through the actions, and how are you going to evidence it? And essentially, when will the stop point be? When will you have achieved it? It's not just about going in. You have to structure it properly. You have to have that structure in order to get the buy-in as well.
One of the other things that I learned on this Entrepreneur Accelerator was if your prospects' problems were easy to solve, they'd have already solved them. They wouldn't need you. And that's a good analogy for safety as well. We wouldn't exist if this was easy to do. It would all just be getting done anyway. So it's not easy, but it's enjoyable to try to move things forward. Jane, you've got your hand up. How are you doing this morning?
All good, Christian. Long time no see. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, keeping busy, pontificating every Wednesday morning.
Yeah. Just a couple of comments, and I think that we've got what I would probably describe as quite a mature health and safety management system, and that's been brought about not seeing health and safety as an objective, but it's a key business critical risk, and it's on our risk, business critical risk registers. And also, I think, your points earlier about we'd be out of a job, actually work as if you want to be out of a job. So we train absolutely everyone in our business on health and safety, because the more people doing health and safety and the more awareness of health and safety, the better and the more mature we are. So I work every day to do myself out of a job, and that's what makes us more mature. So I think that for me, the two things is not seeing it as an objective, but it's a key business critical risk. And if your directors don't get it, then get some training for them, because they're the ones who are going to be on the stand and they're the ones who are going to be prosecuted. So from my perspective, and share that knowledge around, all teams at all levels should have a competence in health and safety.
Definitely, yeah. That's very good points there. Thanks, Jane. Crystal, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Great to be here. My first time.
Yeah, it's 4:30
in the morning, and
I was going to say you're very keen. It's pretty early in the morning for you.
Yes. I'm glad I finally made it on. But yeah, this discussion is really interesting, and what I've taken so far, just like allocation of funds and resources, I think is something that we that would be good to track. How resourceful resources that are allocated for safety programs, and just like you mentioned, the safety performance and improvement, everything that Kevin and Nikki and Christian, now Jane, has said. I mean, I'm just agreeing with that. It just allows for a proactive method instead of, because I always get people with the bottom line, like, with the claims and, of course, hiring a professional, someone to help you with your safety culture is going to, affect that bottom line when you have claims. So, looking at planning and looking at, like, we're talking about the budget and what's allocated to make sure that we're in a proactive way to deal with to deal with claims and so forth, so that we can have that profit buy-in. So it's all about, like, I see now safety going in the risk reduction method. So this is a way to reduce risk, is to have that buy-in and allot the resources that are needed.
I also think, thanks for that. I also think that what we're doing here is we're trying to think about some of the positive sides of what we do as well, and some of the positive outcomes, because I think it's very easy to, if you look at SHP magazine, they every month on LinkedIn and Twitter and stuff, they put a post out and they show that their most popular articles read in the previous month, and it's all the most popular articles are always, fine for this, prosecution for that. It's very much around that negative side. And I think that actually what we need to try to do, this is my view, and I don't know how we do it, but I think this is an objective that we should try to aim for, is to sort of try and get a bit, we need to be mindful of that stuff, but we've got to try and get away from that, and I think try to be a bit more talking about the positive sides of and an enabler and that sort of thing. I think otherwise we risk sort of being seen as we pigeonholed into that cost side of things. So it's about the both sides of risk. Risk also means opportunity in many ways. But that's not an easy one to do. But I think this kind of approach helps, because we're looking at the positive business outcomes and tying ourselves into those. I think that's a good starting point.
How popular is prevention through design in the UK? Because I don't know. That's like a big thing now. It's like having safety at the table from the beginning in design phases of because I'm in the construction field of safety, but I do a lot of CPDs. There's huge amounts of CPDs, for all manner of safety related stuff that architects can benefit from and get involved in. And I would say I've been in this field for about 12 years, something like that. And I would say that we're far better at that now than we were before. But you still, I'm sure you do this, you do everywhere, but you still see, certain things happening where it's like, oh well, right at the end of a project, something is flagged up that should have been dealt with at the start, but you're always going to get sort of small mistakes, I suppose. Okay, thank you.
Cool, thanks, Crystal. Good to have you here. Hopefully, we won't expect to see you every week, because I think waking up at 4 a.m. is pretty tough, but perhaps occasionally we'll see you.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. Youssef, comment ça va?
Ça va bien. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Again, it's all good. So it's nice to be able to join you again, Christian, on your roundtable. In fact, everything is interesting. All the interventions and the questions and so on, especially what I think Keith has said. Not David. No, David talked about planning, and Kevin talked about the budgets. In fact, I remember in like 1 month ago, I think we were talking about how to sell safety to your board.
Yep.
And I remember that Kevin told that when an HSE officer or manager comes to the board, oh, here comes the Punisher or something like that. So in fact, it relates also on this subject because when we talk about budgets and safety in companies and about safety and risk assessments, risk management, and so on, in my old experience, in fact, the problem, they take minimum measures, and when the problem occurs, and then, oh, the problem is here, how do we react? And then So it's more like reactions rather actions. And this is the problem, in fact. So in a profit point of view and a performance point of view, sometimes it doesn't really hit the managers and the investors until the problem is there.
Yeah.
And this is a huge problem, in fact. And like you said, you were in your presentation, you thought there was one claim per week, and then you intervened and you took when you implemented all the measures and so on, it started to become one claim per month. But the thing is, the problem has already occurred.
Yeah.
And the objective always is to put in place something to prevent the reoccurrence, of course, and to prevent it basically, in fact. So this is a really important stuff, and especially David, I think afterwards talked about planning and mentioned planning, the 4P, the 5th P. In fact, there's sometimes investing in risk assessment, risk management, and so on is really important. But the thing is, sometimes it's costly. Especially, there's like always the example of the PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, and act. This is a really important, in fact, cycle that can really help companies, in fact, in a point of view, in a budget point of view, that they can profit and gain in performance, and eventually don't face these problems in the beginning. But because when you implement this type of cycle, or when you use this cycle, in fact, then you can have the testing phase and then go on and do the real implementing phase. By doing so, you can just like have a small budget and just like have great performances. So it's a really high, good quality, quantity, let's say, attacking of the subject. So yeah, this is I really liked everyone and their intervention. It's really helpful and really insightful. So I agree again with David about Kevin about the budget. This is a really huge problem, but the thing is, for me, the budget situation is always in the reactions phase rather than the action phase, and this is where we should maybe act as safety professionals on that point of view and go to our board and tell them put some more money in it. That's it.
Thanks, Yusuf. I think the point there about action versus reaction is a really important one, and I think that's where, again, if you know there's the risk, but actually the risk hasn't yet happened, then it might be quite difficult to get someone to invest in reducing the risk of something they haven't actually seen for themselves or haven't experienced for themselves in their own organization. And I suppose, again, that's the battle that we face with slips from a perception perspective. That's why I would say, again, that if we can draw some strings between what we're doing from a proactive, positive perspective in safety and how that's going to drive performance and operations and other aspects of the business, then almost you can sort of look at it as a business case to invest on that basis, which they might be able to buy into more readily and more quickly than the business case for preventing something that they haven't seen and they perhaps don't expect is actually going to happen. So again, I think it's about trying to just get our perspectives a little bit wider from just, we're about keeping people safe, which obviously we want to do, and that's why we're in this field. But into just thinking, well, what else? What are the other benefits that we bring, and how can we tie those together? How can we layer those up? How can we quantify those? And actually, we can start to build that business case for that action, not reaction, using that approach. I'm just quickly, because it's 1:45, I'm happy to stay for longer, but just before I call you up, Isaac, I'm just going to share what we're going to talk about next week. So next week, oops, there we go. Next week should be an interesting one. So I do a lot of work with insurers, and I have done for many years. And one of the hidden secrets of the safety and risk world is that you can actually get funding from your insurance company to pay to make your buildings safer. So we're going to delve into that next week. I call it the insurer carrot, which is you've got the stick of, we're going to beat you up as an insurer on price, and we're going to make you pay a higher premium and a higher deductible and all that stuff. And then you've got the carrot side, which is let's partner up and let's work together and let's try and proactively reduce risk. So hopefully that will be an interesting topic, and look forward to seeing everybody for that next week as well. And then just quickly, before we take Isaac's intervention and anyone else that wants to join in, if this has resonated at all, and if you'd like to delve into that case study that I shared about how we work with a leisure company to drive down slips and falls and all the positive outcomes for businesses that achieved, then do book in on christianharris.online. It's a live diary, and you can just slot in a meeting with me, and it'll send you a Zoom link and stuff, and we can have a chat and learn a bit more about your business. So Isaac, how are you today?
Hello, Kristen.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Very, very, important topics there, and I'm very grateful to be here. I just want to say something about the engagement part of it, which is, I think, is the most important thing in safety, because, we all know as a safety professional that safety is not just our responsibilities, but it's the responsibility of everyone in the business. And this is what we have to tell people, because they think that the health and safety manager officer is the own and solemnly responsible of safety, which is a wrong, thing. So we have to obviously drive that forward. I believe that we have to, first of all, have that personal engagement with people, understanding how people react to things, how people understand things before talking about safety. The human side of it is more important than the safety side of it for me. So what I do normally is, obviously the director has to know what happened if obviously we have some issues, and the directors mostly think about the profit and the money. So this is where figures come into place, because this is what they understand. But when you go to the bottom line, the people that work in the construction, the manufacturing people, they just want to have that human side of the safety aspect, which is very important for us to drive. So having relationship with those people at the bottom line is very important. So you'll be able, obviously, to understand what they care about and to drive safety from that point of view. So engagement has to be tailored by the people that you're engaging with. The second thing is just a question for you, Christian. You were talking about the percentages, the 17% increase. Like, how would we get those figures from? Should we have to contact the production and operation manager? Like, how can we link all that we do to the let's say increase of profit or the increase of performance? How do we get those figures? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, fully agree with you on everything you said there. So thank you for joining in. And I think, particularly that you've echoed what I said. You've got to meet people where they're at. So everything needs to be, and what we were saying earlier as well. That it's easier to do stuff one-to-one and understand people properly, and then deal with their situation. So spot on there. In terms of getting the data, I mean, this is not an easy question to answer, because I do think it's going to vary by company. But I would start that process by having a conversation with the people in the different parts of the business. So whether it's production or operations or whatever it is, and start to understand what are the KPIs that they're measuring around productivity, I suppose, and whether that's units made, or whether it's days off, or whether it's downtime, and you've got to try to understand how they're measuring stuff at the moment, and then just think about where what we do within safety can link into those existing KPIs. I think it's going to be difficult to start measuring something new. So trying to latch on to what they're doing, and you don't need to have big numbers. If you think about the principle of marginal gains, for most businesses, if you can increase one KPI by 1%, that's going to be worth huge amounts of money. So we don't need to be thinking about trying to get 17% improvement. It's about can we achieve a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% improvement in a few different areas, I would say. So I think perhaps we'll dive into that topic on another roundtable, and actually think I might go away and have some conversations with some of my clients and see how they would go about that, and perhaps we could share some thoughts and come back and maybe even put together a bit of a little working party or something about this, and see if we can figure out a way of coming up with a standardized approach. Good stuff. Well, look, guys, it's 10 to 10. I'm happy to take any more interventions, but if not, then thank you so much for joining. I thought this was a really good session. Some great stuff in the chat. Some great interventions and discussions as well. So thanks very much. The last thing I'd say is, do share this, to people that that would benefit from getting involved, because it'd be great to see more and more people from different sectors and different countries and different backgrounds getting involved in this and really making the discussion as rich as possible. So thank you very much, and I'll look forward to seeing you all next week to talk about how to get insurance companies to pay to make your building safer.